Stuart Leach, who is the Group CISO at Wonga. Now, Stuart, most people know that Wonga are currently in administration, so this must be a quite unique challenge as to how you keep them secure when potentially there's not a lot of money to spend on security right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, obviously going into administration, a reduction in staff almost immediately. So really, it's obviously prioritisation. Mm-hmm. It's looking at what other areas of the business we can utilise, as in resource. Mm-hmm. So really gives an opportunity all round for people to also get involved in security. So it's good from an inclusion aspect, but also looking across sort of vulnerability threat management and so on, really tapping into the infrastructure teams and so on to actually go through remediation with obviously the regulatory needs that we still have. Mm-hmm. So it's really trying to keep an eye on the risks and prioritise those things as best we can.
And are you finding that you have an increased threat profile or reduced? Where is it sitting?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly increased. I think when you enter administration, obviously you're inside a threat in respect of data exfil and so on. Obviously goes through the roof at that point. Yeah. So again, it's about prioritisation of the data in a sense. So as much as you obviously want to protect all of those flows and all the data that could be exfiltrated, and you've got your existing controls, it's really how you increase the monitoring over certain areas to ensure that your customer data and so on, the databases are not walking out the door. So.
And how are you guys doing with that? Is it going well?
Yeah. So and obviously we added additional monitoring around SQL, around those type of databases. And sort of data loss around email as the most likely route of exfiltration. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just a case of keeping eyes on to see what happens. I mean, going into administration, you have that immediate loss of staff where people are concerned, obviously, about how long they're going to be in a position. So that's really where the risk is heightened at that point.
So from an outsider aspect?
Yeah, it's very well advertised. Obviously the going into administration, so the target of Wonga obviously increases somewhat. Yeah. So that obviously again is an increased risk that we need to work very closely with the administrators to make sure they're well aware of what that risk looks like.
Okay. And you've worked in financial services, the FinTech area for a little while. So do you think there are particular threats that are unique to that industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly sort of criminal organisations, it's obviously a target. There's obviously known valuable customer information there. There's obviously card data, those type of things. So I think what we see generally is, I mean, certainly now with obviously the popularisation of nation state, the type of exploits that are available that then trickle down to these groups. So I definitely think that there's specific targets that hit financial services, but I also do think that other industries also get into grips with those attacks as well. You things like your WannaCry and so on. You know, there's also elements of you're kind of an innocent bystander in a sense. With these other organisations that were not necessarily the target, but a way in because they were a supplier. Yeah. So I do think the overall ecosystem is more of a target now as well. And as I say, casualties of the fact that things like your banks and other financial services are obviously increasingly a target as well.
We've seen a massive increase in that third-party risk and the realisation that is the way in often at the moment. Do you think companies have realised that? Do you think that there is good security around that now?
I think there's an appreciation that now is a very real threat. I think it's quite a difficult thing to manage because it depends on what your view is of how you secure that. So obviously you have your due diligence processes as you're taking on suppliers, and obviously that should be repeated. But obviously suppliers that have consistent connectivity into your environment, you're obviously having to try and manage and understand their risk profile and their threat landscape in order to understand how that risk translates through to yourself. So it's a difficult area. And obviously there are organisations now that are looking at, certainly from a technical aspect and an attack element from third parties. So I think those things are very much going to help, but I don't think it's a wide offering that people are adopting at the moment.
There's more to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And if we're looking forward at the coming year in cybersecurity, what are you seeing as the trends? What do you think is going to happen next?
I think there's obviously a lot of talk around attacks through AI. And in a sense, I actually think the attackers are actually further ahead with AI than the defenders are.
We hear that a lot, yes.
Yeah. So there's certainly that element that will come through. And then there's sort of aggregation based attacks as well. So your likes of, everything's cloud. So therefore that being a target, again, is something I think is a very big thing, but that obviously requires an awful lot of sophistication, or you would expect anyway, with the likes of AWS and so on, for those attacks to be successful. I think the thing I actually am quite aware of is I actually think security or organisations are creating a gap themselves in the sense of the rush to adopt things like DevOps. So we're going to the cloud, and you're always going to have, or in organisations that are in transition to cloud, you're always going to have this hybrid nature. And I think legacy tech that hasn't moved over into the cloud is far more difficult to manage from a security aspect. So you end up with different sets of processes and a different mindset in your developers, as an example. So you can obviously move security as far left as you can with the developers, introduce those into release pipelines and so on. But that doesn't work quite so well in the on-prem stuff and in where you've got this hybrid. And I think the focus and the want to really get to this DevOps culture, I think, will actually drive gaps. And that, I think, is going to be very difficult to manage.
The three things you mentioned there, they're kind of emerging technologies. Do you think we're being too quick to adopt them?
I think in some respects, I think the other thing with security is we want to please to an extent. I know we're coming from this area of Department of No, but I think we are evolving to actually try and add value to the business. But I think we're doing that to a degree without the level of discipline that's also required. So enabling the business to do what they need to do, I think will come at a cost. And trying to then get a hold of that after the event is going to be very, very difficult. So we certainly need to look at a new form of governance almost around these things, and make sure we're driving discipline and it's still enabling at the same time. I think traditional methods of governance are not going to work. So we need to be at the front of that. And security also needs to get up to speed with the culture very, very quickly. And that's more from a security professional aspect than security more generally. But I do think we're behind the curve.
Okay. Well, that's been really interesting. Thank you very much for sharing some of these new challenges with us.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.